Mic check 1 2 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and there are two more mini consoles that we absolutely need, and I think it's pretty upsetting that we haven't gotten them yet. Now, I've seen a ton of YouTube videos that have tried to explain why we haven't gotten these minis yet. Um, Everything from licensing issues to the technology required, so on and so forth. But at this point, I don't care what any excuses or any reasons why we haven't gotten these minis yet. We absolutely need these two minis. The first mini that I believe we absolutely need is we need to have a Sega Saturn mini. We just need to have one. I think it's long overdue. We should have gotten one a long time ago. And why? Because there's a lot of good games that came out on the Sega Saturn that may never see the light of day again. They just may never see the light of day. Like outside of obviously, you know, emulation and pirating, but my dream Sega Saturn would have Three Dirty Dwarves, Dark Savior, Guardian Heroes, Burning Rangers, a style. Of course, you'd have to have a style on there. The Last Bronx, um, Batman. I mean, I could go on. Herc's Adventures. I could go on and on. But there's so many good games on the Sega Saturn, and in my opinion, I think the best games are actually the import games. So the Japanese games. Think of all of the shoot 'em ups, all the Sega Saturn shooters, Hyper Duel, Dodon Pachi, Metal Black, Sonic Wings. Um, I mean, I could keep going forever and ever. There's so many games that would make a Sega Saturn Mini worthwhile, and I feel like, I don't know. Maybe it's gonna take some mountains to be moved for that one to drop, but I think that a Sega Saturn would definitely be a worthwhile console to put into a mini format. Do I think a Sega Saturn would mini? Do I think that would sell commercially? Do I think like it would sell a lot? I don't think it would do major numbers, but I do think for the retro gaming enthusiasts, probably for those who can kind of like recognize a Sega Saturn, even if they never had one, but they're like, oh wait, that looks familiar. That looks like something that that I may have wanted when I was a kid, right? For those folks, they might see it and they might want to give it a shot. But do I think like the general public would really be clamoring for a Sega Saturn Mini? In all honesty, I don't. But I do think, I mean, if we have a Neo Geo Mini, we oughta get a Sega Saturn Mini. So that's part one. There's another mini that I do think we need, but this one is a little bit tricky because I think the latest model mini, right? That the latest generation of minis that I think we got was the fifth generation. We clearly have the fourth generation in the Super Nintendo and Genesis, also the Genesis Mini 2. We got the third generation, right, in the NES Mini. I don't know if there's a Mini Atari. Somebody can let me know that down in the comments. I never bothered seeking one out because I wasn't interested. But we know that we at least have some third generation representation in the NES. We've got some fourth generation representation, and then for the fifth generation, we do have the PlayStation 1. Now, the Sega Saturn would be another entry into the fifth generation, and I highly doubt they make an N64 Mini. I mean, if they did, great. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would buy that one. How it would look, how it would work, that would be interesting. It would be interesting to see Nintendo 64 controllers with like this type of plug-in at the base. That'd be very interesting to see. But they could do it. And I guess you could put like 4 of these slots on an N64 Mini. You'd have to see how it all works out, but that would be another fifth generation representation as well. Now, we have yet to see a sixth generation Mini. And I don't know if that is because the sixth generation would be too soon. But what would be a sixth generation mini console? Well, that would be like the GameCube mini, or the Xbox, the original Xbox mini, or the PlayStation 2 mini. Did I say PlayStation 2 already? Maybe I didn't. What did I say? GameCube, Xbox, PlayStation 2? Right. So those are all 6th gen. But the one console that's kind of like that in between 5th and 6th that we really need to see is, yes, you guessed it, a Dreamcast mini. We do need a Dreamcast mini, in my opinion. Um, for a lot of the same reasons that I feel like we need a Sega Saturn mini. The only difference is I feel like the Dreamcast would be a lot more recognizable than the Sega Saturn. And because a lot of the Dreamcast's catalog, it was in the actual arcades, that's also a big part of the reason why I think a Dreamcast mini would be great. Now, there were a lot of Dreamcast games that were like on the PlayStation 2. A lot of the popular ones, right? Like Crazy Taxi, Marvel vs. Capcom, um, Project Justice. Well, Project Justice wasn't on the PlayStation 2, but Project Justice is going to be a part of a compilation. So I don't really know if you need a mini for that, but hey, I mean, it was on the Dreamcast, right? Um, but you have a lot of like the exclusive to Dreamcast titles that would definitely make a Dreamcast mini worthwhile. When you think about games like Bang-I-O, when you think about games like Heavy Metal Geomatrix, Sword of the Berserk, Super Magnetic Neo, Gigawing 1 and 2, Mars Matrix, I mean, geez, the Grandia 2. There's just, when you think of the Evolution games, Evolution 1, Evolution 2, I'm just trying to think of some of the more just only on Dreamcast games. And when you think about some of that lineup, I mean, the Dreamcast has its own compelling titles as well. Oh, Shenmue. What am I talking about? Yeah, Shenmue. How could I forget Shenmue? There's just so many games that were on the Dreamcast that I think would make a mini worthwhile. And again, I don't know if it's the technology, if it's licensing, what it is, but I think these are two minis that we really need. We really need. Like, could I survive? Like, if I had to sell all of my Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis stuff, could I survive on the Super Nintendo Mini, the Genesis Mini 1 and the Genesis Mini 2? I think I could survive. I think there's enough of my favorite titles on those mini consoles that I could survive. Now, for me, I do have a particular taste. You guys know I love my beat 'em ups, my shoot 'em ups, my platformers, my hack and slashers, and that's a lot of what my collection is made up of. So I really like having those games in my collection. But just for the sake of being able to play some of the best titles, yeah, the mini would do the trick. It wouldn't be a cure-all, but I think if they started to add some of these more rarer consoles and some of these more rarer games in a mini format, it would definitely make a huge difference. Because to be quite honest with you, when they came out with the TurboGrafx Mini, where's my TurboGrafx Mini? I think I have it over here somewhere. Oh, here it goes. Hold on, let me show you this. So this is one of my favorite consoles, mini consoles for sure. This is right up there. But with this mini console, I can't say the same thing for this mini console that I can for like the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. But to be quite honest with you, the TurboGrafx Mini almost truly eliminates the need for an original TurboGrafx. Like, you really don't need an original TurboGrafx, in my opinion. Unless you grew up with the console, there's like some games on there that are super nostalgic to you that like really take you back, that are not on this mini console. I personally think that out of all the mini consoles, this is the one that truly replaces the original. Why do I say that? Well, one, I have had an original TurboGrafx 16. The hookups are very temperamental. The console itself is known for a lot of failure. Just a lot of issues with the TurboGrafx 16. That's part one. Part two, the way the cartridges are set up for the TurboGrafx 16, you can actually play these games on an analog pocket if you get the adapter. So you don't necessarily need the console to be able to play the games. You can still play the games on the analog pocket, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I know with the original, you can do the whole CD attachment and play like TurboGrafx CD games and stuff. And I guess if that's something you want to do, sure, I'm not hating on that at all. But just in terms of like TurboGrafx 16 RAW to TurboGrafx 16 Mini, this is really all of the TurboGrafx action that you truly need. There's over what 40 games plus on this thing. They did not hold back in this mini. This is one of the only minis that, in my opinion, they jam packed it with like the best games, including a lot of the best niche shoot 'em ups, side scrollers, hack and slashers, which is really where this console excels. This is what this console is known for, in my opinion. I don't think this is not like the console you're gonna get to play a bunch of RPGs. This is like action game heaven, right? So, shoot 'em ups, run and gun shooters, hack and slashers, platformers, things like that. I mean, the main reason, one of the biggest reasons why I got this mini console was for where's it at? Where's it at? Where's it at? Well, one, it does have the TurboGrafx version of Dracula X, right? Castlevania. So that's a very cool way to play that game. But the other big reason why I got this game was for this game right here, Lords of Thunder, right? So while I do have Lords of Thunder on the Sega CD, um, it plays better on the TurboGrafx. It sounds better on the Sega CD. My opinion. You guys let me know your thoughts down in the comments. But that's what I think. I think it plays better. Lords of Thunder, it plays better on the TurboGrafx. It sounds better on the Sega CD. But there's so much stuff on here, and this console is so good. I mean, just this is one of the few minis that have really held its value over time. I think this still goes for like 250 to $300 new, if I'm not mistaken. And a complete in-box TurboGrafx Mini is like 250. So I mean, this is like the price of the Mini is right up there with the price of the original. It's kind of crazy. And I feel I'm saying all this to say that I feel like you would get the same effect that you got with like the TurboGrafx if you came out with a Dreamcast Mini or a Sega Saturn Mini. Probably more so with a Sega Saturn Mini. Because there's not many people that really want to invest in the Sega Saturn ecosystem. Like they don't want to buy the console and buy the individual games because it's really expensive. It's a lot of money. But if you could get it all packaged in a nice box, I think people would be willing to spend, like collectors would be willing to spend $200 on a Sega Saturn Mini that had a bunch of two, three, four, $500 games on it. I really think they would do that. The same way that a lot of them are willing to spend that kind of money on a TurboGrafx 16 Mini. But these are just my thoughts. I don't know. You guys let me know down in the comments. What mini console do you think we really need to see? Or are you just done with minis? Are you like, man, I'm over the minis, keep the minis, I don't need them anymore? Or are you into minis, and is there a mini console that you really want to see? I personally want to see Dreamcast, Sega Saturn. You guys let me know what you want to see down in the comments. I'll catch you in the next video. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.